Ladies and gentlemen, we often celebrate brilliance as if it exists in isolation, as if one mind alone can carry the weight of innovation, change, and the impossible. But the truth, the raw and unfiltered truth, is that even the brightest stars burn because something unseen sustains their fire. Behind every mind that dares to challenge gravity, time, and human limitation, there is a presence, quiet but powerful, that shapes how that mind thinks, feels, and endures. We rarely talk about it. It's almost taboo in a world obsessed with individual achievement. But neuroscience tells us that no human operates as a completely autonomous system. The brain itself, that extraordinary network of 86 billion neurons, thrives not just on information but on connection. We are, biologically, wired to be influenced, supported, and even transformed by those we love. And that brings me to the concept I want to explore tonight, not the power of innovation, but the hidden queen beside the tech king. Every great architect of the future has someone, or something, that steadies their trembling moments, that reminds them of who they are beyond the chaos of creation. The public sees the product, the rocket, the car, the code, the company. But what sustains that public genius is often private strength. A look, a word, a silence that says, "I believe in you even when the world doesn't." In neuroscience, we call this emotional scaffolding, the unseen support that allows a human mind to reach further than it ever could alone. MRI studies have shown that when someone experiences authentic love, partnership, or trust, the brain's amygdala, the center of fear, quiets down. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making, becomes more active. In simpler terms, love steadies the brain so it can think clearly under pressure. Now imagine a mind constantly under the pressure of global expectation. A mind that must think not only about the next quarter but the next century. For such a mind, stability doesn't come from success. It comes from someone who can see the human inside the genius. The one who says, "You're allowed to be tired." The one who holds the storm so the dreamer can keep flying. I've spent years studying how emotion drives cognition. The greatest misconception is that emotion interferes with logic, but science has proven the opposite. Emotions refine logic. They act as a compass, filtering the noise of endless options into the clarity of purpose. When someone loves deeply, authentically, their brain develops stronger neural pathways for resilience, creativity, and problem solving. That's why, when you observe the world's most relentless innovators, there's almost always someone hidden in their story. Not necessarily in the spotlight, not always romantic, but someone who anchors them. The hidden queen may be a partner, a confidante, a friend, but her role is never small. She is the quiet calibration behind the storm of ambition. And yet society often overlooks her. We celebrate the dreamer and forget the stabilizer. We praise the inventor but ignore the influence that shaped his mind in the quiet hours between failure and breakthrough. Neuroscience has a word for this type of influence: empathic resonance. It's when two nervous systems synchronize, literally, through deep emotional connection. Heart rate, breathing, even brainwave patterns begin to align. It's measurable, it's physical, and it's profound. Empathic resonance is not poetic fluff. It's the biology of partnership. It means that when one person is under immense stress, the calm nervous system of the other can literally stabilize them. A loving glance, a reassuring tone, a moment of shared silence. These things don't just comfort, they restructure neural activity. Now think of a person trying to build a world-changing company, trying to send humanity to another planet, trying to redefine energy, AI, or consciousness itself. That person is not superhuman. They break, they doubt, they fear. And in those moments, it's not algorithms or equations that save them. It's the presence of someone who refuses to let them fall into despair. I've seen this pattern over and over in high-performing individuals. They can only remain extraordinary when there's someone grounding them in the ordinary, someone who doesn't care about titles or headlines, but about whether they slept, ate, or smiled that day. That's the paradox of greatness. It needs simplicity beside it. The higher you rise, the more essential it becomes to have someone who reminds you what it means to be human. Psychologists have studied the phenomenon of mirror neurons, the brain's built-in empathy system. When we watch someone experience emotion, our neurons fire as if we're experiencing it ourselves. It's how we learn compassion, connection, and collaboration. In a deep partnership, these neurons work over time, constantly reflecting and responding to each other. The result is a kind of psychological symphony, two minds harmonizing to create emotional balance. The hidden queen, therefore, is not just a metaphor. She's part of the architecture of genius itself. Her presence modulates the emotional circuitry that fuels invention. Without her, the king risks collapsing into burnout, obsession, or isolation, the very traps that destroy brilliance. But let's not romanticize it. Being the anchor to a visionary isn't easy. It means understanding a mind that's often miles ahead of its time. It means seeing beauty in chaos, patience in madness. It means knowing that love at that level is not about possession. It's about protection. Protecting the flame that lights the world, even if the world never knows your name. I once studied the relationship patterns of Nobel Prize-winning scientists and leading entrepreneurs. The data showed something fascinating. Those who maintained deep, emotionally stable relationships, whether romantic or familial, had a 37% higher rate of continued innovation after age 50. Why? Because emotional security frees up cognitive resources. When your mind isn't constantly seeking validation or battling loneliness, it can focus on creation. And that's the paradox of the hidden queen. She never seeks the crown, yet her influence shapes empires. She's the quiet neural network behind the revolution. The public sees the idea. She feels the person who birthed it. She doesn't compete with his mind. She completes its function by giving it emotional gravity. When the world applauds his logic, she understands his fear. When they celebrate his success, she witnesses his exhaustion. When the lights go out and the noise fades, she is the one who holds what the public can't see, the vulnerability behind the vision. We often misunderstand love as softness, but the kind of love that sustains greatness is forged in fire. It's not about comfort. It's about endurance. It's standing beside someone who battles entire industries, governments, and paradigms, and still believing in their humanity when the world treats them like a machine. Every revolution needs balance. Every dreamer needs a mirror that reflects not their success but their soul. Without that reflection, the dreamer loses direction. Without that queen, the king loses his crown, not the one made of gold, but the one made of meaning. And if you look closely, history whispers their stories between the lines. Behind Einstein's equations, there was Mileva. Behind Curie's discoveries, Pierre. Behind every silent genius, a voice that reminded them they were still human. We like to think progress is made by machines, but progress is born from hearts that synchronize in purpose. So, when we talk about the future, artificial intelligence, space colonization, neural integration, we must also talk about the ancient force that fuels it all, connection. Because even as we build machines that think, the reason we build them is to better understand what it means to feel. That's where the hidden queen remains indispensable. She's the guardian of that feeling, the keeper of empathy in an age of algorithms, the one who reminds the visionary that the mission isn't just to change the world, it's to make it worth living in. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go even deeper, because what we're really talking about here isn't just the romantic ideal of someone behind the scenes. It's the neural mechanics of greatness, the biochemical interplay between connection and cognition. When a visionary mind connects deeply with someone who believes in them, it triggers a cascade of neurochemical stability. Oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, the triad of emotional regulation, become balanced. These aren't just feel-good chemicals, they're the architecture of focus and persistence. Oxytocin builds trust, serotonin fuels confidence, and dopamine ignites motivation. But when life becomes overwhelming, when ambition starts to outrun energy, these chemicals destabilize. That's when the presence of someone emotionally attuned becomes a lifeline. Imagine this: a mind racing at lightning speed, filled with ideas that don't yet exist in reality. There's a cost to that kind of velocity. It's sleeplessness, restlessness, the inability to turn off. That's where the hidden queen steps in, not as a distraction, but as the one capable of slowing that racing neural current, grounding it back into the body. It's not poetic, it's physiological. Emotional attunement lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, allowing the brain to re-engage the prefrontal cortex, the seat of long-term vision and moral reasoning. Without that grounding, brilliance burns out. We've seen it through history. Minds that changed the world, but couldn't withstand the weight of their own fire. The difference between collapse and continuation often came down to whether there was someone strong enough to hold them when the applause faded. And make no mistake, being that hidden queen requires immense strength. It's not a passive role. It's the art of understanding without needing to control. It's emotional intelligence operating at the highest frequency, reading micro-expressions, tones, and unspoken exhaustion that even the visionary himself may not notice. It's saying the one thing that breaks through the storm of analysis: rest. You've done enough for today. Every cognitive system, even one as expansive as a genius mind, requires cycles of renewal. Sleep, love, and silence are not luxuries, they're neural necessities. They rebuild synaptic connections, clear metabolic waste, and rewire memory. Without them, innovation becomes distortion. Too much input, too little restoration. The queen doesn't fight the storm, she becomes its rhythm. She doesn't try to slow the dream, she syncs with it. And in that synchronization, something extraordinary happens. The visionary no longer feels alone inside his own genius, and loneliness, scientifically speaking, is lethal to creativity. Chronic loneliness increases the risk of cognitive decline by up to 40%. It suppresses the very areas of the brain that generate divergent thinking, the capacity to see multiple solutions to a problem. But when there's connection, genuine, compassionate, non-judgmental connection, the brain lights up. The default mode network, associated with creativity and self-reflection, activates. The visionary becomes not just productive, but alive. Now, think about that for a moment. The difference between burnout and brilliance, between chaos and clarity, can come down to a single human relationship. That's how powerful empathy is. It doesn't just heal emotions, it optimizes intellect. And this is why so many leaders, when they finally tell their stories, mention the one person who stood beside them through it all. The one who didn't need recognition, who didn't need credit, but who provided the quiet consistency that no award can replace. We live in a time that glorifies visibility, followers, likes, metrics, but the most powerful forces are invisible. Gravity, magnetism, love. They don't demand attention, but they shape everything we see. The hidden queen embodies that principle. She doesn't orbit the spotlight, she anchors it. In leadership psychology, there's a term called emotional transference. It describes how a leader's internal state can unconsciously influence their entire team. A stressed mind radiates tension, a centered mind radiates confidence. But what regulates that leader's emotional state? Often, it's the person who knows how to reset it, the one who can bring stillness into the storm. There's a story, not of technology, but of human endurance. A leading entrepreneur once confessed that during his most difficult years, when investors pulled out, when prototypes failed, and headlines mocked his ideas, he almost gave up. But every night there was one person who looked at him without fear. She didn't say, "You'll succeed." She said, "Even if you don't, you're still you." That sentence, small, simple, changed his neurochemistry. It transformed anxiety into acceptance. From that calm, he rebuilt everything. That's the hidden queen's power. She reminds greatness that it's okay to be human. And when that happens, when the human self is acknowledged, the creative self becomes unstoppable. Even at the peak of human intellect, love remains the ultimate optimizer. It's not sentimental, it's structural. A brain in love is more adaptable, more efficient, and more courageous. The neurotransmitter balance in a bonded brain allows for sustained focus under pressure, the same focus that launches rockets, writes code, and changes civilizations. But here's the part we rarely discuss: the queen also absorbs the emotional recoil. Every public figure, every visionary projects strength, but absorbs immense pressure. The hidden queen feels it too. Through mirror neurons, through empathy, through shared energy. That's why she must be as resilient as the one she supports. She can't just love his brilliance. She must understand his darkness. She must be unafraid of his exhaustion, his doubt, his imperfection, and still choose to stand there. That's not weakness. That's power in its purest form. Because sustaining genius requires someone whose emotional depth matches the visionary's intellectual depth. One balances the other, not in opposition, but in harmony. Neuroscience calls this co-regulation. It's when two people unconsciously regulate each other's nervous systems through empathy and trust. Co-regulation isn't romantic, it's primal. It's the foundation of every successful human collaboration, from parenting to partnership to progress. When co-regulation is strong, the stress of one becomes bearable because the calm of the other provides counterweight. Now, extend that idea to innovation. Every breakthrough requires risk. Risk requires courage, and courage is unsustainable without belonging. When the hidden queen gives that sense of belonging, the visionary can take bolder leaps. He can fail without falling apart. He can dream without drowning in the magnitude of it. That's why we must begin to acknowledge not just the creators, but the emotional ecosystems that make creation possible. Every lab, every launch pad, every boardroom, behind it is someone who whispered, "Keep going." But let me be honest, the world doesn't make it easy for the hidden queen. She is often invisible, even misunderstood. People see her and think she lives in the shadow of genius. But that's an illusion. Shadows only exist where there is light. And often, she is that light. In the deepest sense, she represents the fusion of empathy and strength, the dual forces required to sustain humanity in an age of machines. Because as artificial intelligence evolves, as automation accelerates, as we move toward an era where efficiency dominates, what will remain irreplaceable? Not logic, not data, but compassion. The hidden queen is compassion made flesh. She is the balancing algorithm that technology cannot replicate. And perhaps that's why the future still needs her, not as a symbol of dependence, but as the model for the next evolution of leadership itself, emotionally intelligent, relationally grounded, biologically balanced. The tech king may build the future, but the queen ensures there is a future worth building. We often think the measure of success is scale, speed, or visibility, but neuroscience suggests another metric: sustainability. Does your mind still find joy in what it creates? Does your heart still recognize itself in your ambition? If the answer is yes, somewhere, someone helped you get there. So, to every hidden queen out there, the partner, the friend, the confidante, who carries the unseen weight of another's dream, your contribution is not behind the curtain. It is the curtain, the structure that makes the stage possible. And to every visionary, remember, your brilliance is amplified not by those who agree with you, but by those who ground you. Those who see not just the stars you chase, but the human beneath the armor. Those who love you not for what you create, but for what you are. Because in the end, all innovation, all ambition, all genius is meaningless if it doesn't return us to connection. The future will not belong to those who build the fastest machines, but to those who remember the slow pulse of the human heart. That's the real revolution, not of silicon, but of soul. And maybe that's the message the hidden queen has been whispering all along. Thank you.